Home, at last. Traveling can be hard work. Just ask an amateur. Driving all over to get documents, waiting for the mail, 2 months packing, or mostly just thinking about it. Getting a ride to the airport, terrified of being late. The mile-long lines for check-in, passing by all the guns, emptying the luggage for officers at security, getting sniffed by a dog. The walks and too often the runs to the gates. More than once during those rushes, I said, I never want to do this again. Sitting, waiting, walking, running, searching for the bags tossed out of the plane, hauling them, getting from one hotel to another hotel, then touring, the point of it all. Walking miles, sometimes in the hot sun or pouring rain, squeezing through little places with 50 people or passing through wide open areas with hundreds of others. And a few times, I have to say quite a few times, I'm walking around a corner and I'm hit with a particular view, and I can't help saying anything more articulate than, "Oh, wow." We saw the Italian Alps. That was our last view of Italy. The temperature outside the plane, flying at 37,000 feet, was 80 degrees below zero. We were flying against headwinds most of the way back to JFK, and I hadn't begun to sort out all the memories of the trip, and I bet I never will. In a way, I hope I never do. I imagine they'll give me a lot to consider for the rest of my days. The tour began in Rome. We landed there on May 3rd, 2018 at about 6:30 in the morning local time. We hadn't slept for even a minute on the overnight flight, and now the day was just beginning. Traffic was bustling and sunlight filled every space. After leaving Columbus, Ohio, our luggage stopped moving for the first time at the Hotel Mediterraneo, right downtown. The lobby provided a place for the first few of us to get initial instructions from our tour director, Daniel Bogan. Despite all the advice we were given about not taking a nap in the afternoon, we winked out for 2 or 3 hours to satisfy a need brought on by wakefulness and alertness for some 20. After the nap, we joined a group which was later to grow to 42, and we walked to a nearby restaurant. On the way, we heard that these trees nearby the hotel were healthy and normal for their species. They only added to my sense of being in a dream. Some aspects of this realm were strange and a little disconcerting. Signs everywhere were, for me, indecipherable. The architecture seemed to have changed instantly. This was a different world. The disruption of the sleep cycle may have been a factor in this, but the conversations, easygoing and delightful, made us completely comfortable in this new situation. We had found new friends. The thought that after 10 days we would never see them again did not occur to us. Back to the Hotel Mediterraneo at the end of the day, now thinking in local time, if not entirely adjusted to it. The next morning we were up, ate breakfast, and boarded a bus. We were off to Vatican City. Piazza San Pietro, St. Peter's Square, is never empty for long. For religious celebrations and just appearances by the Pope, it's packed. Every now and then, as we see, it can be relatively quiet. The walls of Vatican City were built in the 9th century to resist barbarians. The walls don't encircle the city. There are many entrances that are not physically challenging, although there are guards and gatekeepers to screen the hordes. In any event, we didn't need a ladder or a catapult. Just this ticket provided by our tour director got us in. The bronze work by Arnaldo Pomodoro in the courtyard of the Pinecone is likely the first object to attract the attention of visitors here. In English, the work is known as Sphere Within a Sphere. Its diameter is about 13 feet. In any given year, millions of people visit the main attractions in Italy. Thousands move past or through the most popular attractions in just a day. At that rate, the typical tourist can't stop to study a painting or statue or take much time to ponder its significance. Individuals in the crowd may slow down for a second, but not more, to let a person take a picture. But most photography has to be done on the run. Forget the tripod and lighting arrangements. Non nobis Domine, non nobis, sed nomine tua da gloriam. Not to us, Lord, not to us, but to your name give the glory. That's the motto of the Knights Templar. The celerity in the kind of tour we took afforded us the opportunity to see or at least pass by hundreds of works in dozens of locations. So it was a survey, a rapid, neck-snapping journey that involved catching views and recalling and processing them later. On the west side of the Belvedere courtyard, we found the gallery of maps commissioned by Pope Gregory XIII. The maps are the work of a priest and professor of mathematics, Ignazio Danti. This map, for example, one of 40 map frescoes, shows Calabria in southern Italy. This hall is an avenue to the Sistine Chapel, where we are prohibited from taking pictures. The Papal Basilica of St. Peter in the Vatican, commonly known as St. Peter's Basilica, is another masterpiece from the Italian Renaissance, and inside are works of art unparalleled in all the world. Since much of the history of Western civilization is involved with the history of the Church, various churches had rightfully prominent places on the tour. But this wasn't a religious pilgrimage. I wanted to visit some pagan sites, and we did. We went by the Arch of Constantine on our way to the Colosseum. Rain met us. And by the way, if you're not carrying an umbrella, you'll find enterprising people there trying to sell you one. If you have one already, you'll get offers for an upgrade or for one to carry in your free hand. Our best advice, bring your own bumbershoot. About the arch, the Romans put it there to note the victory of Constantine in the battle he fought with Maxentius in the year 312. Triumphal arches span the roads traveled by conquerors as they entered the city. We traveled these roads mostly to gawk. The Colosseum is in ruins, you know, but what is obvious, too, is how much of it has endured, despite the deliberate destruction by robbers of stone and destruction resulting from earthquakes in 443, 484, and 1349. Even more enduring than the buildings are the intellectual and cultural contributions from the Roman Empire. The Romans gave us substantial foundations for language, jurisprudence, political philosophy, and system of government. The greatest contributions we make to the future of humanity may well include our language, our science and technology, our economic and political philosophies. But more than anything else, we better count on preserving the information we've amassed. Many of our greatest technological creations, like optical and electronic devices, TVs, computers, smartphones, and the like, are very fragile and stand a far greater chance of being lost to history than buildings of stone. People in the future may have no idea how advanced our civilization became because heat and wind and soil will quickly obliterate our delicate inventions. Our tour director singled out these people who preferred sitting to walking up higher in the Colosseum. We moved on to the Fountain of Neptune in Piazza Navona. Despite our need for water, we never considered taking a drink from it. We had expected to find several public fountains from which we could get immediate refreshment or fill our bottles to carry, but we never noticed any. Fortunately, when we were near our bus, our driver had bottles of water we could buy for a small price. We were very happy to pay for the hydration. Standing in the distance behind Donita as she welcomed all visitors to the Piazza Navona is the obelisk of Domitian. The obelisk is at the center of the Fountain of the Four Rivers, created by Gian Lorenzo Bernini. The Church of St. Agnes in Agony now occupies the ground once dominated by the Domitian Stadium. In that stadium, St. Agnes was martyred. A ride through the city provides views of a lot of interesting buildings. In the Prati district of Rome, we pass the Palace of Justice. There is the Supreme Court of Italy and the location of the Judicial Public Library. On our own, briefly, and afoot, we pursued a creature comfort. Pharmacies are easy to find. Just look down streets for the comforting green neon crosses above storefronts. We were looking to buy Epsom salt for soaking tired feet. We had this luxury at home, but hadn't yet enjoyed it in Rome. The phrase Epsom salt didn't help us in talking with the pharmacist, however. Epsom salt is the heptahydrate sulfate mineral epsomite, but we didn't have to go that deep. The pharmacist knew chemistry. When we mentioned magnesium sulfate to her, we got the stuff. 2 bags, in fact. This is the key card to our room at the Hotel Mediterraneo. And I should have returned it, I know. In the rush of the tour, I just didn't think about it as we left. Sorry. Consecrated in 1253, the Basilica of St. Francis is a papal minor basilica with Romanesque and Italian Gothic architectural styles. Inside the Basilica of St. Francis, you'll find the papal altar. The frescoes are especially interesting. A lecture was underway when I took this shot. Most of the churches we visited allowed, expected, and even encouraged photography when no religious services are being conducted. A notable exception is the Sistine Chapel, and another one is this area in the Basilica of St. Francis. A fellow tourist, more specifically Mike, conveyed the stern message that no pictures were allowed to be taken here, and I stopped immediately, just after ripping this one. Near the Basilica there are shops, restaurants, places to stay, and pretty views in every direction. We didn't stay at this hotel, but probably would have been delighted there. It's been in operation since 1908 and affords some stunning views of the countryside. This shop is associated with the nursery of the same name. The nursery produces lavender, sage, ornamental grasses, and a variety of perennials. Every year in Umbria, near Assisi, there's a lavender festival held on the last 2 weekends in June and the first weekend in July. A feast of the sages takes place in October. There's food for the body as well as the soul in Assisi. There's food in this shop, and more than the name Cacio Pepe suggests. More than cheese, more than pepper, a fascinating store that had me calling our companions into it. A musty air hovered all the while I watched these things. It wasn't unpleasant, nor was it delightful. It was interesting. And in this shop I discovered the source of the expression "under the Tuscan sun." There are several restaurants in Assisi. We went to a cafeteria where the selections were plentiful and delicious. Across the aisle from our table there, we saw 2 icons. A slogan came to my mind immediately: "Things go better with Marilyn." Rooftops in Perugia are as photogenic as they are in many towns in Italy. James Bond tore up some roofs in Siena like these during one of his many pursuits in Quantum of Solace. Screenwriters and filmmakers can count on much of Europe for scenes that seem at once a bit familiar and comfortable, and yet somehow exotic, or at the very least glamorous, to audiences in America. These steps lead into the Palazzo dei Priori in Perugia, which houses the National Gallery of Umbria, where we can find a collection of Italian national paintings, most especially works of the Umbrian School of Painting. There are 40 galleries in this building. Right next to the Palazzo, in the piazza named for the 4th of November, is the Fontana Maggiore. And here next door is a blend, a little jarring, of the very old with the contemporary. I'll bet the building will endure the many changes likely to come to the styles displayed and even the uses made of the spaces inside. In Perugia, on the day we were there, we saw parades of cars, old and new, of bikes about to race, and of models dressed to the nine. This is the key card to our room at the San Gallo Palace, and I didn't return it as I should have. I'll bet a lot of people just keep them as souvenirs. Italy has plenty of people touring on bikes, and bike tours are very popular in Siena. In the Piazza del Campo, which is at the center of 17 districts, home to many buildings of historic importance, we're at the bottom of an incline. Our tour guide Daniel is waiting for us to gather together and then hike it. This trek is one reason why the members of this kind of tour have to be in shape. If you're not, you will be afterward, or you'll likely find yourself in traction. If you order a pizza to be delivered in Siena, it could come in a Twizy. This car is made by Renault. It's electric, and it seats up to 2 people. This car was the exception, but the typical cars on the roads we saw will seem small to most Americans. Traffic is heavy in big cities, places to park are often hard to find, and gasoline is very expensive by American standards. So all of these facts prompt Italians to make sensible decisions and buy smaller cars. This was one of the extreme consequences of this rationality. This is a vehicle used by one of the postal services. Ned and Patty here give us a sense of scale. If the vehicle lost its power, the driver might be able to carry it. Anyway, pushing it would likely be easier. The Cathedral of St. Mary of the Flower, or the Florence Cathedral for short, is seen in the distance a little left of center in this overview of the city. Our bus stopped in a lot where we took the opportunity to stretch our legs and feel the nice warm day and enjoy the scene from this privileged point, despite the somewhat hazy sky. At last we stood in the Piazza del Duomo to view the Florence Cathedral close up. Brunelleschi's dome, which we had only glimpsed from a bus stop a few miles away, was now almost close enough to touch. The doors of the baptistry are the Gates of Paradise by Lorenzo Ghiberti. These we could touch, but for the necessary barricade. The town hall of Florence is the Palazzo Vecchio, seen here from the Piazza della Signoria. In front there's a replica of the David and a statue of Hercules and Caucasus by Baccio Bandinelli. The statue depicting the abduction of the Sabine women is in the Loggia dei Lanzi, situated in the Piazza della Signoria. The building here is near the Uffizi Gallery, which is one of the major attractions in Florence, which we did not visit because of the demands of our schedule. We never lacked for things to see. Michelangelo's statue of David stands in the gallery of the Academy of Florence. This gallery has had as many as 1.5 million visitors in a year. The inscription tells us that this is the ancient center of the city, restored from age-old squalor to new life. As we did elsewhere, we feasted on the architecture in Florence, but most of that is probably not for sale. For anyone in the mood to shop, there are some wonderful stores. If you're not just looking and you want to buy something, the most important thing to have with you is a fat wallet. You can have desserts, pastries, cookies, and candies, including chocolates, at Migone. and more fine Italian chocolates, cocoa spreads, filled bars, chocolate cigars, tin boxes with assortments of their offerings at Vaenki, watches and jewelry at Swarovski, and you might ask them about some crystal. Leather, if you're into it, from Puserterie. And then there's even something for carnivores. This is the card giving our room number at our hotel in Florence. They didn't use key cards. Instead, we had an old-fashioned key with a weight on it so heavy that anyone attempting to leave the premises with it would walk with a noticeable limp. Moreover, anyone attempting to board a plane with the key they gave us would likely incur a charge so large that the passenger might have to consider leaving a spouse, or at least a suitcase, behind. I'll bet most people think of water when they hear of Venice. And while the notion of water does not encompass everything about Venice, it does distinguish it from most cities. We even came to take it for granted, yet it didn't lose its appeal in the short time we were there, and it hasn't lost its appeal in our memories of the place. Yet I'm afraid of any body of water I might fall into, including a bathtub. And I'm afraid of heights. On our arrival, Daniel told us we will have to cross 4 bridges on the way to our hotel. I heard that one of those bridges, the longest, has a glass bottom. Great. I felt my stomach tighten and my heart pumping faster and wondered if I could find my own way without the bridges. but I reasoned that that would involve swimming, which I can't do, or boarding a boat, which would be like taking a taxi to cross a street. I had to man up. And I did, sort of. I believe my record time for crossing that bridge will go unchallenged for decades. Doge is the name for the chief magistrate of Venice when Venice was a republic. A palace was built for the Doge in the 9th century, but fire damaged it a century later, and a new palace took its place. Over the centuries, several fires damaged the structures, and restorations of the old buildings and additions of new ones have given us some of the most impressive architectural achievements in the city. In the Hall of the Compass in the Doge's palace, we saw the mouth of secret accusations. Putting a note into it was like dropping a letter into a mailbox. But unlike an ordinary mailbox, here is where a citizen could share a secret about a potential enemy of the state or spread a rumor to that effect. This was but one way the government controlled its subjects. You could warn the rulers about a tax dodger or a threat to the authorities, or just cause a lot of trouble for somebody you didn't like. We took the path prisoners took across the Bridge of Sighs. This bridge connects the halls of justice in the palace to the prisons. The name refers to the sighs the prisoners would likely utter as they catch their last glimpses of the world outside. These scribbles on the walls of the cells have long outlasted the lives of their authors. A lot of visitors to Venice take their turns in gondolas, and we were not exceptions. We also fell for the offer of the picture that's forever supposed to conjure pleasant memories of the trip. Even so, the most relaxing experience during the entire trip occurred in that boat. My only regret was that the time there, a half hour, was too brief. An hour and a half would have been better. 2/3 of the way into our time on the water, I managed almost to dream. We viewed a demonstration of glass-making by a master of the craft. We saw this man transform a red-hot ball into a finished work in a few minutes. The few minutes taken by this expert pay off handsomely for the store when the piece is sold. The shop where the finished articles were on display and available to buy did not allow photography. The beauty of the intricate crafted works did support the claim that they could be considered works of art. We boarded a boat, and the island of Murano shrank from view. Then, for the leg that included the Grand Canal and a spot right outside our hotel, we took a bus boat. We were going home. But in Venice, we were home already. Water never seemed to be so magical. The oldest shopping arcade in Italy lies between the Piazza del Duomo and the Piazza Scala. Under the iron and glass roof of the Galleria, in the city considered one of the fashion capitals of the world, we found stores with famous names and goods with extraordinary prices. Window shopping, fortunately, afforded us cheap but complete satisfaction altogether free of guilt. A local guide explained what happened to the bull of Turin. It once had big nuts. Not content simply to look at them, a great many visitors to the Galleria took to digging their heels into the depiction of testicles and spinning around once or twice or 3 times. Whatever the motivation, a quest for virility or fertility, an expression of disgust with the display of what should remain covered, or the anger of men over their failure to match the endowment, the prowess of the bull has been significantly reduced. Clearly, the bull was no match for Carla. She walked away, and the bull, to our knowledge, is still unable to get back on its legs. We were pressed. We had about an hour and a half to find, order, wait for, eat, and pay for lunch. No time for slow food. We had many choices, some very fine restaurants in one of the richest places in Italy, and in fact, the world. The restaurant we chose had 2 floors and a glass elevator to move visitors to one or the other. In the employ of this establishment, there were at least 2 gentlemen dressed in black suits and ties to guide and ensure the satisfaction of the diners. On the upper floor, a large case with elegant pastries. A treat for the eye, to be sure, but after a cursory glance at the menu, we chose the quarter pounder with fries and a Coke. Remarkably, the presentation and taste of the meal reminded us of some we had enjoyed in the United States, and we were very much relieved to find that the place had a restroom. We got back with the tour group on time. For all its affluence, the Galleria pales in comparison with the Duomo nearby. The Duomo di Milano, or the Milan Cathedral, or the Metropolitan Cathedral Basilica of the Nativity of St. Mary, is not as large as St. Peter's Basilica, but it is the 4th largest church in the world. The arrangement of streets in Milan revealed the Duomo to be at the center of the city. Through the centuries, the church combined a few different architectural styles, but the result is nonetheless grand. Visitors are dwarfed in this cathedral, and that's probably one of the intentions of its designers. Oscar Wilde called this church a failure, the design monstrous, everything in it vile, but overall imposing. Other critics had more to say, some of it nicer, some of it about as harsh. The cathedral, in any event, is the result of the work of thousands of people over hundreds of years and the accumulation of considerable wealth in one extremely ambitious project. Whether it glorifies God as much as it glorifies its patrons is, to my mind, an open question. On our tour, we could regard the visit to the Duomo as the exclamation point at the end. After another pass through the Galleria, we loitered in the Piazza Scala, where we observed only the outside of the Opera House and caught our breath while we shared a bench with other tourists and some residents of the city. We were all aware that our tour had finished. We were boarding a plane for the trip to the U.S. the next day. I think I lost the key card to the Crowne Plaza Hotel. I did get some stationery, though, and I'll gladly give it to anyone who will hand over in trade Donita's smartphone, which we last saw at a store in Bologna. What's on that phone is a video of me on stage with a beautiful singer of operas. After my brief time with that gorgeous woman, I swore to myself that I would be attending more operas. can't sum it up in a word. Friends and acquaintances who are passing by and pressed for time usually say something like, "I know your trip was great," or "I'll bet you had a wonderful time." And I'll say, "Yes, it was," or "Yes, we did." I have no problem with dear friends or casual acquaintances summing it up in a brief encounter with me. It was our experience, my wife's and mine. It wasn't theirs. And they have more important things to do than listen to me drone on about a trip. Regarding that trip, it wasn't great, or fantastic, or exhausting, or overwhelming, or stimulating, or wonderful, or any one experience. It was all of those and more. No one can sum up art or history or literature or travel and do them complete justice. I just end up believing that I will never forget all the people we met, the places we visited, the magnificent creations we saw during that first trip to Italy.